Hello, I am Gail Christopher, Executive Director of the National Collaborative for Health Equity. On behalf of the Collaborative and many other organizations in this country, I am inviting you to join us in celebrating the 6th Annual National Day of Racial Healing on January 18th, 2022. It's hard to believe it's been 6 years that we've been commemorating and acknowledging this very important day. It follows the celebration of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. Every year, it follows that celebration. It's a day that we set aside to stand up for the belief that our country can actually eliminate and overcome the harms of racism. Yes, we believe that we can, and in fact, we must eliminate racism. And that's what the National Day of Racial Healing is all about. It's a time for communities to come together and embrace and honor the humanity of all people. It's a time to be truthful about this legacy that our country carries, a legacy that dates back to our inception as a nation. But it's a time to envision a future in which we have actually addressed racism. We've actually, and I'll say it, I'm a Star Trek fan, we've actually eliminated and jettisoned this false ideology, this false notion of a hierarchy and a taxonomy of the human family. Now, we've made a lot of progress in this country over the centuries and over the decades, but not enough. And the COVID-19 pandemic and the flurry of killings of people of color by police officers and the public protests calling for justice, they've combined to culminate in what the media has dubbed a moment of racial reckoning. But if that reckoning is to actualize into justice and fairness, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us committing to the hard work of transforming the culture, the policies, the practices, the narrative, the relationships, of transforming our country into one that has the potential, the possibility of actualizing our founding tenets that we're all created equal. And so the National Day of Racial Healing is set aside as a day to energize that commitment and to engage hundreds of thousands and millions of people in standing up for this work. It's part of the process we call truth, racial healing, and transformation. Now, our nation has never implemented a comprehensive nationwide truth and reconciliation process, as many other countries over 40 have done. But we don't say reconciliation, we say transformation. And there's a very specific strategy at play there. One is the fact that after the Civil War, the South and the North in some ways did reconcile their differences, but they did so without eliminating permission to continue racist policies and racist behaviors and racist practices. The reconciliation was a reconciliation of the South and the North of the states, but it was not an eradication of the cause, the permission to enslave. So we haven't done that work as a country. In fact, a false narrative was propagandized and perpetuated for many, many decades, all the way through the 20th century, and now it's experiencing a resurgence in the 21st century, a false narrative of a hierarchy of human value that's rooted in our antiquated history of 200 years, more than 2 centuries actually, of enslavement and the decimation of indigenous people. So we have work to do as a country, but our future and the viability of our democracy requires that we actually do this work. So the National Day of Racial Healing, again, January 18th, 2022, is a day that we set aside to recommit to achieving these outcomes and to doing this work. Let me tell you a little bit about the framework that guides the work of truth, racial healing, and transformation. The first component or pillar of the framework is changing our narrative, telling authentic, true stories that acknowledge the humanity of all people. A true story that celebrates our individual and collective and interconnected humanity. And it means a lot of changes in our society. It means changing our school curricula. It means writing new books. It means engaging the media. It means using social media not to divide us, but to unify us. The narrative work is critically important work. It also involves proper data systems that reflect not just our inequities, but our potential, our possibilities for being and having equitable outcomes. And then there's the relational work. We will never build the critical mass, the public will, to sustain equity and fairness without doing the relational work that allows us to care enough and demonstrate that care. And that's what we mean by racial healing. And so on January 18th, we encourage you to set aside some time and to orchestrate some very specific relational work that allows you to become more skilled and more capable of seeing yourself in the face of the perceived other. And that work can be racial healing circles. It can be all kinds of efforts. If you visit the website of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, you'll see what other communities have been doing over the last 6 years, 5 years. Last year was our 5th anniversary of this work, and it's really encouraging to see the hundreds of thousands of communities that are engaging in this work, communities and organizations. And once you do the relational work, you're going to have more of a community mass, more of a sense of engagement with others to tackle the real challenges of policy and practice. I often ask myself, how has this lie, this fallacy of a hierarchy of human value, how has it been sustained for so many consecutive centuries? And it's been through very specific methodologies, one of which is through separation. Separation takes myriad forms, everything from snatching children from their parents to residential segregation, to redlining, to the cradle to prison pipeline. The list goes on, but all of it's designed to keep us apart and to not acknowledge our basic human need for one another. The other way or means of maintaining racial hierarchy has been through a legal system, through policies and decisions that are designed to maintain that racial hierarchy. And then the final pillar of the TRHT framework is through our economy. We've had some amazing studies in the last few years that reveal how much we are losing as a nation by continuing to discriminate, by continuing to allow racism to be embedded in our economic practices and policies. And so those are the 5 pillars of the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation framework: narrative change, racial healing and relationship building, and overcoming the legacies of structural racism in terms of the ways in which we've been separated, the ways in which the legal system is designed to maintain that hierarchy, and the ways in which our economy has been designed to benefit a few, not the many, not the whole, by maintaining this fallacy of racial hierarchy. So on the National Day of Racial Healing, communities talk about the work that they're doing. They work around and in the pillars that I just described, and it helps to move us forward. You know, our country celebrates significant holidays, significant days in our history. And we certainly hope that the National Day of Racial Healing will become a very significant day, that one day we can say it was the day, in fact, that acknowledges the end of racism in this country. Part of the work is envisioning that as a possibility. I have so many people as I travel around the country speaking, I have so many people who are just tired of being reminded of the injustice and the inequities. And they ask me, Dr. Christopher, what gives you hope? What keeps you inspired? And my response to that is that I've seen how much progress we have made, and it is significant. And I know I've seen individuals overcome the barriers to equity and fairness. I've seen communities come together and create new ways forward. So I believe in my heart that we as a democracy can overcome our legacy of division and racism, and perhaps more importantly, that we must. I believe democracy is a very good idea, and I know that it's under threat right now with all the authoritarian momentum around the world and even in this country. But I also know that if we are to actualize the promise of democracy, we must overcome and eliminate racism. We must become guided by a philosophy and an ideology that truly honors the value, the equal value and the worth of every human being. We can't just say that all are created equal. We have to put the mechanisms in place whereby we really do believe that as a country. And we have to stop kidding ourselves. We didn't believe that from our inception. And we didn't build a society that's grounded in that belief. And so it is my contention that it's not enough to just deal with the consequences of racism. We have to deal with the belief itself. Buckminster Fuller says, change doesn't come by attacking existing models. We have to create new models, then make the existing models obsolete. And the idea of the supremacy of any race, the idea of a hierarchy of human value, the idea of a taxonomy of the human family that puts some people at the top based on their physical characteristics and others at the bottom, that's an obsolete model. And it is up to us to create a new model of relationship, a new model of how, in fact, we as a society are called to demonstrate our compassion and our care and our concern, and to direct our resources to providing opportunity for all to thrive. We can do this. COVID-19 has shown us that we can turn things upside down, shake them out, and restructure. And young people have seen that and are marching and demanding and calling for us to use our creativity to create new models, new ways of being and new ways of seeing and new ways of doing that honor our true humanity, and perhaps most importantly, that enable us to be in a different relationship with our very planet to assure our collective survival. And so I invite you with enthusiasm and excitement to join us on January 18th, 2022, and find creative ways to create new models that celebrate our common humanity on this 6th annual National Day of Racial Healing. Thank you.